Defining giants in the Bible. In the Old Testament, giant is most commonly referred to by the word Raphaim. Throughout the entirety of the Old Testament's narrative, the Raphaim serve as a fascinating and significant recurring motif. Where does the Bible mention Raphaim? The Raphaim are first mentioned in Genesis 14. The Bible relates the political situation that led to Abraham's nephew, Lot, and the people of Sodom and Gomorrah being taken captive. Before that, King Kedorlaomer conquered the Rephaites at Ashtaroth Karnaim, also defeated the Zuzim and the Emim. Genesis 14 verses 5-6, Amplified Bible. In the 14th year, Kedorlaomer and the 3 kings who were with him attacked and subdued the Rephaim in Ashtaroth Karnaim, the Zuzim in Ham, and the Emim in Shaveh Kiriathaim, the Horites in their mountainous country of Seir as far as El Paran, which is on the border of the wilderness. If we assume that the Rephaim, along with the Zuzim and the Emim, were giants, then the Bible is implying that King Kedorlaomer was a powerful king. He defeated giant armies. As King Kedorlaomer rose to power and consolidated nations and lands, other kings formed a confederation to oppose him. Sodom and Gomorrah were a part of the confederation. After the confederation loses in a battle against King Kedorlaomer and his allies, their territory is raided, and Lot is among the captives. Abraham learns about these occurrences from a survivor. Abraham gathers his people's arms and leads them into battle, where they join forces with other monarchs to defeat Kedorlaomer. They are successful in the end. Genesis 14 brings up a few things that are worth considering. First, Abraham is counted among kings and accorded the status of a monarch, despite the fact that he is a nomadic affluent patriarch. Second, Abraham was successful in defeating a monarch who had previously vanquished armies of giants. The Rephaim are mentioned in Deuteronomy 2 verses 20-21. Deuteronomy is a book that contains Moses' final words before Joshua sends the Israelites into the Promised Land, and Moses recounts much of Israelite history. In Deuteronomy 3, there is an interesting story about King Og of Bashan, a giant man who was the last of the Rephaim. Deuteronomy 2 verses 20-21, Amplified Bible. It is also regarded as the land of the Rephaim, of giant stature, for Rephaim used to live there, but the Ammonites call them Zamzumin, a great numerous people, and tall as the Anakim, but the Lord destroyed them before the sons of Ammon, as they dispossessed them and settled in their place. In the days of Moses, Og king of Bashan was a mighty and infamous Amorite king who reigned at Ashtaroth, who fought the Israelites on their way to the Promised Land. God gave the Israelites victory over King Og's forces, and Moses and the Israelites took possession of Bashan, a fertile land east of the Jordan River. The victory was significant because of Og's terrifying strength and the Israelite forces' relative inexperience. Because of Og's reputation, the Israelites were terrified. "Do not be afraid of him, for I have delivered him into your hands, along with his entire army and his land," God assured Moses. The book of Deuteronomy describes the battle between Og's forces and Moses' forces. According to the text, Og ruled over 60 fortified cities, all of which the Israelites conquered. Israel destroyed the entire population and took control of all 60 cities in Og's kingdom, which had the same high walls as Shihon's. When God decided to hand over an enemy to his people, high-walled cities were no match. Later, at the city of Jericho, the most spectacular demonstration of that truth would occur. He was also a very large man, with an iron bed that was 9 cubits long and 4 cubits wide, 13.5 feet long and 6 feet wide. The inclusion of this detail highlights Og's size. A man in need of this size bed was most likely tall, 10 or 11 feet. Israel does not need to be concerned about the size of its adversaries. All they had to do was remember how big their God was. According to Deuteronomy 3 verse 11, Og was a descendant of the Rephaites, indicating a man of great stature or giant. His colossal beard had become famous and, no doubt, had been saved as a memento. Joshua 12 verse 4. And Og king of Bashan, one of the remnant of the Raphaim, who lived at Ashtaroth at Edrei. The news of the victory spread quickly. Rahab, a Jericho prostitute, believed the Lord had power even over that heavily fortified city because she and others had heard of the victory over Sihon and Og. Moses used the victory to encourage the Israelites. Deuteronomy 31 verse 4. And the Lord will do to them as he did to Sihon and Og, the kings of the Amorites, and to their land when he destroyed them. Og is referred to as the last of the Rephaim in Deuteronomy 3 verse 11, and later in the books of Numbers and Joshua. The term Rephaites is a descriptive word, not an ethnic one. It literally means terrible ones. The Rephaim were giants who fought valiantly. Earlier, when the Israelites attempted to enter the Promised Land for the first time, spies reported that the land was inhabited by giants known as Nephilim and sons of Anak. Numbers 13 verses 32 to 33. And they spread among the Israelites a bad report about the land they had explored. They said, "The land we explored devours those living in it. All the people we saw there are of great size. We saw the Nephilim there. The descendants of Anak come from the Nephilim. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them." Despite King Og's enormous size and strength, God granted Israel's army victory, and they took possession of the land of Bashan. There is nothing too difficult for God. Nothing is too difficult for him. Matthew 19 verse 26. But Jesus looked at them and said, "With man this is impossible, but with God all things are possible." God does not tremble in the presence of giants, and his children should not either. David battles with the Philistines several times throughout his life, and one famous place was called the Valley of Raphaim, a place southwest of Jerusalem in the land of Judah. 2 Samuel 5 Amplified Bible. When the Philistines heard that David had been anointed king over Israel, all the Philistines went up to look for him, but he heard about it and went down to the stronghold. Now the Philistines had come and spread out for battle in the Valley of Raphaim. Were the Rephaim really giants? The Hebrew name Rephaim is frequently translated as giants, and when one considers the biblical descriptions of the Rephaim, it is evident that these people were believed to be of a tall stature and to be of giant proportions. The Rephaim are either a people group, similar to the Israelites, or a family lineage. Both interpretations are possible. Whichever, the Old Testament continually associates Rephaim with giant people. Are the Rephaim related to the Nephilim or the Anakim? Both the Ammonites and the Moabites had a word for giants. The Ammonites named them Zuzim or Zamzumim, depending on the translation of the Bible, and the Moabites called them Emim. According to the Bible, the Canaanite word for giants was Anakim, and all these people groups that lived in the regions of Canaan were considered to be Canaanites. These many names are explicitly noted in the book of Deuteronomy 2, where it appears that the term Rephaim was a more general term for giants, and each ethnic group, the Canaanites, the Ammonites, and the Moabites, had their own title for giants. What happened to the Rephaim? It makes sense that the Israelites would have been frightened of crossing the Jordan to fight these people. Their fear kept them from moving forward, even though Abraham beat a king and beat those same giants. In the book of Deuteronomy, Moses reminds the people that they have already conquered giants in the past. Moses does this just as he is about to give Joshua leadership and engage in another battle against giants. In Joshua, the giants make multiple reappearances throughout the book. Even Caleb, the sole survivor of the 40 years spent in the desert, has stated that he intends to fight for the territory that giants rule. Caleb was well past his 80th year when he prepared to do battle with some giants. Joshua 14 verse 12, Amplified Bible. So now, give me this hill country about which the Lord spoke that day, for you heard on that day that the giant-like Anakim were there, with great fortified cities. Perhaps the Lord will be with me, and I shall drive them out, just as the Lord said. Joshua and the Israelites didn't slay or remove all the people from Canaan, which creates a cycle of idolatry and deliverance in Judges. It isn't until 1 Samuel that we see giants again. David defeats the Philistines and conquers Jerusalem of the Jebusites, one of the cities in Israel not conquered before him. The Old Testament repeatedly brings up giants in David's exploits. David proves God anointed him by defeating, you guessed it, a giant. We don't hear about giants as physical people after his reign. What can we learn from the stories of the Raphaim today? To be clear, we shouldn't consider tall people as descended from demons. We can learn from these stories about giants and apply those spiritual principles today. Ephesians 6 verse 12, Amplified Bible. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, contending only with physical opponents, but against the rulers, against the powers, against the world forces of this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of wickedness in the heavenly supernatural places. As the son of David, Jesus entered Israel and began his ministry. He didn't have to deal with physical giants, but he had to deal with a lot of demons. One of the most important aspects of Jesus' ministry was consistently casting out demons from people, even legions of demons. His disciples, like David's mighty men, were also given the power. This is critical, because the promise is no longer a physical land. Jesus did not deal with physical giants. The promise is a people, and just as Moses, Joshua, and David cast out giants before entering the promise, Jesus cast out demons in order to bring them back to life and redeem them for the promise. The New Testament makes it abundantly clear that we are engaged in a spiritual conflict. We have a spiritual foe who wants to kill, steal, and destroy us. We've been given armor to aid us in this fight. But we must remember that we cannot defeat these evil forces on our own. If we try, we will retreat in terror. At the Jordan, Joshua and Caleb argued that if they trusted God and his promise, they would win. 40 years later, Joshua and Caleb put that belief to the test. The battle, David told Goliath, belonged to the Lord, not to the sword and spear. Our spiritual victory is entirely dependent on our faith in God, his love, and his promise to us. However, we must fight. The land had been promised. Joshua and the Israelites still had to go and fight for the land with God on their side. The harvest is ready, but we must pray to be the ones to harvest the souls that God seeks, to win them for reconciliation with God, and to save them from the evil forces seeking to destroy them. What giants stand in your way as God calls you forward? Learn from Abraham, Moses, Joshua, Caleb, David, Christ, and other faith-filled heroes. Engage in the battle with faith in God, who is faithful and good, who has already won the battle through the cross and resurrection, and who has defeated death in Christ.